have to say, yes, I am patriotic. And I don't think that means that I agree with everything our country does or agree with what mass culture says is right. But I think that I'm patriotic in a way that I know that if I don't agree, I can say that I don't agree, and I don't have to feel threatened that I can't speak my mind and can't articulate what I think in a free way. And I think that's the most important part about being patriotic, that this is a good, not necessarily a good country, but it's not a bad place to live. In many other places, you wouldn't have the opportunity to speak your mind.
Am I patriotic? Well, I would say I am, but not in the conventional sense where I am a saber-rattling sort of patriot. Patriotism to me is much more of a cultural thing than it would be a power thing. And I think in this country, being a patriot has a lot to do with power.
I chose to become American. I came from another country, and I could have kept my passport. I chose to become American. I took the exam, etc. So I feel maybe more patriotic than many people because of my background. Now, I've always been a pacifist. I was active when the Contra were at that time, and I believe a lot in talking things over. However, when I look back, just since the time I'm here, we have been in so many wars. And for what?
The display of patriotism is a form of religion, in my opinion. From an anthropological perspective, what is religious is that we hold very strongly without fully thinking through. It is something that comes right out of our soul. And so what is coming forth today as patriotic is a combination of nationalism and religion, or a religious nationalism. And that's just where we are.
I look at my own sense of patriotism in a way, the way I look at my own sense of myself as a parent. Okay, I love my child, but when she's wrong, I feel it's my obligation to correct her. I stand by her, but I think it's great to love your country, and maybe in certain ways in sort of unconditional love, but I think patriotism lately has been a fashion, that's why I brought my flags. But I guess I feel, that old saying, my country, right or wrong, I feel that way, but when it's wrong, I think it's my obligation as a patriot to speak out.
Following the leadership of the country is to me, is not patriotism. Questioning the decisions of the leaders of this country is patriotism. A series of checks and balances, even as a citizen, that you can apply to the decision-making process that takes place in the government. That, to me, is patriotism.
I think it's a great place to live, but in terms of the political entity, I don't feel any particular loyalty, I guess. And maybe that's because we haven't been threatened. My dad was in World War II, and he tells me about the patriotic feelings of those days and it's hard for me to comprehend. But maybe if we're threatened in that way, maybe those feelings would come out. I have no doubt they would, but maybe I've just been too lucky so far to never have been, our country's never really been seriously threatened in my lifetime.
Patriotism is something that comes from tragedy, and after September 11th, I definitely did feel that kind of patriotism, but I think it was more of it just came from sadness about what happened to my country, because I've lived here all my life. And so when something like that happens, I do feel patriotic, but I don't really feel like there's much good that can come from flag waving and kill Osama bin Laden, promotion, that kind of stuff. I don't think that has any point to it.
I think that a lot of the drum beating about Saddam is attached to our thirst for oil. And yes, Saddam's regime has been very repressive. He's done horrendous things to his own people. And there have been other countries where there's been that same sort of abuse, and there's been no reaction from the United States. You didn't hear any of this rhetoric about the regime in Rwanda or any of the African countries. You didn't.
They want Iraq because Iraq, first of all, has the second greatest oil reserves in the world. And Saudi Arabia looks like a rather shaky ally in the Middle East, and this could secure American hegemony there, conceivably for a long, although I don't think it will, because I think it's going to blow up in everybody's faces. But I think that's the Bush strategy. And so September 11th has just been manipulated, and I think that's what you're getting at. I definitely think that it was a gift to the Bush administration.
This whole scenario is about one thing mainly, which is oil and money. And then tangentially to that, it's about power, because oil and money are power. So whoever controls the oil controls the money and therefore has the power. And that's what this is about. I mean, the Bush family has always been about oil and money and power. As much as W likes to portray himself as a good old boy from Texas, he is not a good old boy from Texas. He is a silver spoon-fed Easterner who's had nothing but privilege in his life, and is not the Texas rancher that he portrays himself, I don't think. But in order to consolidate his power and the money, they need this oil. And
when we talk about a conflict with Iraq and the commodity of oil, two big questions arise, and you can't deny them. First of all, the country of the United States runs on oil. We consume a lot of oil. The country of Iraq has a lot of oil. George Bush and his father have spent most of their lives looking for oil, and when they find it, they acquire it somehow and make money on it. So, I mean, it's all terribly logical to say that there is some motivation in the conflict between the United States and Iraq that is motivated by oil. I don't think you can take that out. Oil is too precious a commodity to the United States and to the rest of the world for it not to be a motivation. Is it a blatant and open motivation? Are we talking about invading Iraq or having open hostilities with Iraq to be able to pump their oil for free? I don't think so.
Well, yeah, I think oil makes the world go round, and especially it makes the United States go round. It uses 25% of the oil that's used in the world. And so if you have this aggressive imperialist agenda where you want to secure hegemony, you better first of all secure oil, because that is a very destabilizing factor. And it could in fact derail this whole undertaking that Bush has if in fact oil prices are spiked by 3 or 4-fold. I think the American people are going to just, not that that'll necessarily stop Bush, but I think that whatever popular support there is for this undertaking may evaporate very quickly. So I think that oil has to be seen as not the end, but sort of the precondition for the pursuit of their further objectives. Because it's not just about oil. It's about opening up markets and maintaining American dominance of markets around the world, access to raw materials, all the things that imperialists have always been interested in controlling. The United States now wants to secure its dominance over.
Yeah, but if those SUVs with their American flags were on economical cars, we wouldn't have had the problem in the first place, because we wouldn't be so dependent on foreign oil. And therein lies the crux of a lot of the problem.
There's this thing in French that says, l'argent fait la guerre, money makes war. This is, I don't know, since the 18th century, it's been which is true every time you see the economic background. So it would be much smarter to implement other resources in this country beside oil.
I think that anytime anyone believes he or she is absolutely right, there isn't room for to consider others. And I think religious fundamentalism, no matter where it comes from, doesn't allow room for consideration of others, and makes the participants feel totally justified in anything they do, because if they harm someone else, after all, my God told me to do that. And we have Muslims feeling that way, we have our Christian right feeling that way, we have Israeli Orthodox Jews feeling that way. I think it's a very destructive force, and I think religion provides justification for any action.
For there to be a God, you need a demon. For there to be something to be patriotic about, there needs to be something that is evil. When this country, when the Soviet Union collapsed and this country lost its demon, I noted that on broadcast television, almost immediately Arabs began to be casted in the role of the bad guy. That was 10 years ago. So to me, what we are in the midst of is a simplistic religious journey as a society. It is fear-based. But I believe, again, until one matures in their religion, fear is a very strong part of who we are as human beings. And until we become conscious of our fears and can understand them differently or more complexly, it is very helpful to have simple ways of dealing with it. And Saddam Hussein currently is a very convenient simplicity. It's important to remember that 20 years ago we were supporting this gentleman.
As I mentioned, if I'm looking at that of God in every individual, then I have to honor that individual. And I don't have to believe what he or she believes, but I have to honor that person's beliefs. And that means I'm not necessarily right. I may believe what I believe, but I can't impose on someone else. There's always room, well, for religiously, I can't impose. And I certainly don't have the right to harm anyone else or to destroy anyone else or to deprive anyone else because of my religious beliefs.
Well, I got to say, I have a little fear and hostility toward the radical, the Al-Qaeda who want to kill us. Yeah, I have a fear and hostility toward them.
Well, I can discuss more my fear than other. Having seen many, many wars, it's the worst thing that mankind can do. And we are in Afghanistan, and that war is not really finished. That should be the priority. The second should be to bring some peace in the Middle East, because that's like a volcano.
Frankly, right now, I think our own government poses more of a threat to us than Saddam Hussein does. That scares me more than anything else. I think because of the buildup of fear, the way the administration has utilized that fear, has created fear, has told us that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction and still has not been able to verify that in any way that's believable, and yet still just keeps pounding to the public that this is the case, and people sort of are believing it because there's nothing else out there. And then to pass laws to be able to arrest people without charges, without allowing them to have lawyers, which he's done with some of the Muslim community, I believe. And I'm afraid that that will spread. I think the laws that were just passed, I haven't read them carefully, but I'm afraid that we have created an atmosphere in which we are giving up our own civil rights because of our fear of others. And I think that can create, I think we can destroy our own democracy from within far more quickly than it will be destroyed from without.
Are these countries a threat to the United States in any way? No more so than I don't think, no more so than any big company in the United States is a threat to the United States. The day that they decide that they are going to take your money, I mean, we've just seen that happen. When they decide that they want to bankrupt you, the big companies in the United States seem to be much more efficient at it than some of the OPEC countries.
The attack on the World Trade Center was really one of our first experiences with terrorism and with the fact that we really aren't safe. But most people in the world live with that all the time. I think we just can't comprehend it.
Do I trust George Bush? I want to say yes.
I don't feel personally threatened by Hussein. You know, I have fears. I mean, I do have fears. I sometimes feel threatened by my own government. I'm afraid that sometimes they're going to act in a way that might cause other people to retaliate. You know, yeah, there were times when I will admittedly, you know, say that I lay awake at night thinking, gee, Indian Point is right over there, you know, there's a big target. Did I think Hussein was the one who was going to do it? No, I don't have that kind of fear. And in a certain way, I think he's been more of a danger to his own people, and those are the people we'll be punishing, you know? So
I'm more afraid of what our government can do at this time than what anyone else can do to us. What the terrorists can do to us is nothing compared to what our government can do to the rest of the world, and that's the truly terrifying thing.
Now, there's a new book that's come out about what do we do with Iraq after we take it over. Do we have the right to say that? I don't think so. I feel like that's the reason why people feel that Americans are so arrogant. We're not even discussing the issues of what's going on right now. We've already jumped past that as to what are we going to do with Iraq after the war is over?
Rogue nations, groups of people acting en masse out of fear or out of greed, which is, I think, another form of fear, do scare me. They are not love-based. So whether it is the United States or Saddam or when Khomeini was the bad guy, or Gaddafi, or you know, the names have all been rotated through, but the behavior is the same. Any group acting as a group without being fully aware of information, without looking first at what is love, what is the most loving thing to do in the broadest possible concept, is dangerous.
I'm maybe not the best person to ask about that, so I don't really watch TV much except Knicks games, or Nets actually more these days. I read the New York Times mostly. I can't stand the nightly news and the talking heads. It makes me crazy. And I believe that the corporate media, it is impossible to find out the truth from the corporate media in this country, and that extends to the New York Times as well. Take, for example, the demonstrations against war that occurred in Europe. No play in the United States to speak of. 1.5 million people demonstrated in Italy, and you would have a hard time finding it in the New York Times. 400,000 people demonstrated in London. The New York Times reported it as 150,000.
The other night on the election coverage, Channel 4, Tom Brokaw's broadcast, they had Rush Limbaugh on as a commentator. What is he doing on the network news broadcast is my question. I turned it off.
I don't believe so. I think that there are certain outlets that are giving that voice to people, but I think in the majority, I'm not hearing what I feel in the media. I think there are a few select outlets where you get an open discourse of the range of people who are outraged about what's going on, who don't agree with what the Bush administration is doing. But I think in general mass media, I think people all over the world think that Americans are in support of what's going on, and that scares me. That scares me a lot.
For me, the question introduces the role of economics in news. Media is forced to do stuff that is profitable. Americans have a certain orientation, therefore, and they have also a short attention span. So in order to get something out there that people will interact with and consume, the media basically has its hands tied. Yes, they feed into it, but they also are limited by it.
The media, though, is very narrow. They don't say what happened in France. In Italy, there was a big anti-war rally last month, but enormous, I think in Genoa. And that is not reported. And I'm sure there are many countries, even in England and the Green Party in Germany, who are against this.
At the very beginning of the Vietnam War in 1963, I was with a group from my college in Japan, and the newspapers were full of accounts of the thousands of Vietnamese citizens being killed. And we heard nothing about that in this country. When I came, and the papers were full of it every day. When I came back to this country, I decided I would write a research paper on my experiences. I could find nothing on what was happening in Vietnam here. We only had a few advisors in Vietnam at that time. And we knew nothing, and there was nothing reported anywhere about deaths of Vietnamese.
The media is really trying to sell this war to us. It's like a product they just want us to buy, because when you turn on CNN and you turn on all the news stations, it's nothing, there's nothing subversive about it, and there's no alternate, viewpoints offered. It's all just, we're going into this war and there's nothing we can do about it. We have to support our president, and, it offers no alternate viewpoints.
How come the system doesn't work? Overlaid onto that, I believe, is also a change that was formalized in 1886 when the Supreme Court said that a corporation is an individual. We are a nation of the people and by the people and for the people, but we have given all the rights of humanity to an entity that has profit as its only value. I, as a human being, am concerned about surviving, but I also am concerned about being a good father. I'm concerned about being a loving husband. I'm concerned about being an active member of my community. Those things are not part of the gross development product. Those things aren't measured in the corporate bottom line. So we have created a race of super beings that have usurped our government. At least for me, that's the way I'm looking at it, and it answers a lot of the dilemmas I otherwise see if I look at the government as being the government.
Well, just in economic terms, this could be really damaging to the United States. The war itself, which will be funded almost exclusively by the United States this time instead of by a coalition. And then the whole reconstruction of Iraq, if the United States actually opts to do that. It's interesting that the United States has spent $13 billion bombing Afghanistan and $10 million rebuilding it. And so if something like that follows in Iraq, then it won't be so costly, except that is going to inflame the rage in the Middle East to a white-hot temperature, and who knows what the consequences would be for that.
We're in debt, both personally, locally, as states, and as a nation. The national debt now is $6.4 trillion. That'll eat us alive should anything hiccup. So what is necessary is not necessarily this war. It is an undisturbed expansion of the capitalistic model of economic interchange among people. So the need for war is a need to oppress the growing majority that are disenfranchised and oppressed, so that the few can keep feeling good about themselves, having a successful religious experience in their nationalism, patriotism, and capitalism.
The current state of our democracy is capitalism. It's all about the money right now. It's all about the corporations, and George Bush got into office by buying his way into office. Power is money, and America has all the power in the world, and we're also the richest country in the world. It's extremely closely connected.
Oh, I don't think it's a potential illegitimacy. I think this man basically was not elected to the presidency and maybe has this feeling now that his way of being presidential is to be commander-in-chief. You know, that makes his role legitimate. I mean, I see a man who I believe so many people have questioned his intelligence. I think he must be aware of this. People have questioned his fitness as a leader. And hey, what better way for him to, assume leadership than to be beating his breast and, leading us, out to defend this great land of ours. And it's in the tradition of his father.
We have the Supreme Court who really appointed Bush. And this is unique in the history of the United States, as far as I know. And Congress, just last month or 3 weeks ago, gave the green light to Bush to go to war. So we have the three branches of government for this war. And so it's difficult to build a really strong anti-war community.
I find it shocking that both the American political structure and seemingly the American public after these midterm elections are so intent on consolidating the power behind this one unbelievably uneducated man. It sort of shakes your faith in America to see this sort of consolidation of power. He's got the executive branch, the House and the Senate, and the judicial. So where are the checks and balances that are so important to this house, this system that we have constructed over 250 years? It's a little frightening. That, to me, is more frightening than Saddam Hussein.
My general sense in the traveling that I've been able to do is that Americans are perceived as very arrogant, very dominant, greedy people. And that scares me because I know that when I meet people, they're like, oh, wow, you're not that bad.
The American public in general doesn't seem so, the word in French is engagé, engaged, and that's reflecting why so few people vote, really. The vote is very low.
My daughter came home one day and said to me, Ma, is this the best country in the world? And I said, honey, I don't know. I haven't lived in every country in the world. I mean, I love this country. Do I want to live anywhere else? No. But again, I think you can love something and not always agree with it, and that's okay. And I think if you really love it and you don't agree with it, speaking out is the best thing to do for it. You almost are obligated to do this. You know, are you a good, getting back to my beginning analogy, are you a good parent if you see your child doing something wrong, something you consider immoral, and you don't correct this child, you don't speak out? Are you a good parent? You may be a loving parent, but are you really a good one? Are you a good citizen? Are you a good American? If you see your country doing something you think is morally wrong and you don't speak out, and in that way, that's where I feel that recently I've been a bad American. I haven't spoken out when I really needed to and said, I love you, but come on, you know? Let's be the best country we are, not just in the knee-jerk, rah-rah waving, you know, this stuff, this, you know, best country we could be. Nah, let's be the best country we can be by challenging those in authority, you know. Might not really deserve to be authority, but challenging them and challenging ourselves and really being the best we can be. You know, that to me is being a true American.
I don't think that we have the right to go into other countries and enforce our culture just by the fact that we are a wealthy country and we can spread capitalism and democracy. I think what makes just living incredible is the differences that we have, and the fact that you can go halfway across the world and you can meet people who think differently than you and not go to a McDonald's and share a Coke together, you know?
We have 2 faculty sponsors, but it's mainly student driven, and we're taking action as we see fit against this war. To start with, we all folded 1,000 paper cranes, and we were going to send them to Hillary Clinton along with a letter that said, that told her about the old Japanese legend that if you fold 1,000 paper cranes, you get a wish. And we wished for peace. And we told our Stephen, our faculty sponsor, about this, and he said, why don't we just deliver these to her doorstep? And we thought that was a great idea. So what we're going to do, we're going to set a date, and we're going to all get in a van and drive upstate to Hillary Clinton's front door in her office, and we're going to deliver 1,000 paper cranes to her. And we might not even get to see her. We'll probably just see, you know, one of her secretaries or someone, but we want to be able to get someone we can talk to. And we're going to come with cookies and cider, and we're going to make it a nice thing, because we don't want to make it seem like we're some anarchist group, any sort of threatening thing. So we're going to be a group of students coming with cookies and a wish for peace. And we're going to hope that does something.
If there's no criticism, there's no democracy. If everybody agrees that everything's great and we got a great country and our past is pristine, what's to discuss? What's to debate? What's to vote about?
We have 6.3, 6.4 billion people on the planet right now. We're headed for 9.2 by 2050. When I was in high school, it was 3 billion. In 1930, it was 2 billion. Our histories and our stories for understanding things are based on a reality where population wasn't an issue. We are now 30% above the carrying capacity of the planet in our environmental impact. That has happened over the last 30 years. Our stories go back to when nature was bigger than us. So for me, with those 2 things in place, our stories, how we understand things, are outdated to our reality. However, at some level we understand that. We just haven't incorporated it into our stories yet. And so the war doesn't make sense anymore. all the solutions, this idea of religious conflict. Yes, it's a religious conflict. It's a religious conflict between competing and cooperation. Not necessarily within organized institutional religions, but as a planet. If we do not cooperate, we will eliminate the ability of this planet to sustain human life.